Hello, hello, hello. Hello, good evening, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to yet again another event as one of PrideTT's programming for this year, Pride 2021. We are doing things all online this year in keeping with the COVID-19 regulations. So good evening and welcome. We want to let you know that your participation encourages us to keep up our work, which is focused on highlighting the positive contribution of LGBT plus persons to the country's national development. So we're so happy that you're here with us. Each year, PrideTT's Management Committee spotlights critical segments of issues facing our LGBT family. And this year's theme is Power, hashtag Power, right? Power. This focuses on the struggle and yet power of our women and their history, which have helped build our movement. PrideTT has developed and curated over 30 events aligned with this theme with several community and ally partners. And we thank you all for your friendship. My name is Zoe, if I haven't introduced myself before, and tonight I am one of the co-chairs of PrideTT, as well as I am the Community Liaison Officer for the Trinidad and Tobago Transgender Coalition, which is our partner for tonight's event, but we'll get to that soon. We want to let you know the details on this year's activities can be found on our website at pridett.com/events. And all of our social media platforms. You can follow us at PrideTT, as well as our mobile app, which was designed by Kate Smith at Twixalot. Tonight's event is titled Trans Women Caribbean Summit. And as I said, we'll be co-hosting with the Trinidad and Tobago Transgender Coalition. We also want to let you know that during the month of Pride, the Trans Coalition is also hosting, in conjunction, in collaboration with PrideTT and the Family Planning Association, we are hosting an HIV awareness and education session every Monday to Friday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And the info is available on our platforms. Finally, we want to remind the public and be proud in our announcement that PrideTT has collaborated with Scotiabank to expand its Generation Gap program as a community-run mentorship program for folks between the ages of 17 and 25. So visit the website for more information, and we look forward to seeing you be a part of all this great programming that we have in store. So tonight, as I said, we are here for the Trans Women Caribbean Summit. And tonight we are co-hosting, PrideTT is co-hosting with the Transgender Coalition. And to kick things off, we have a number of participants from around the Caribbean. But before we get to the participants, I'd like to introduce my co-host. Miss Brandy Rodriguez. Welcome, Brandy. Brandy has 20 years experience as a human rights trainer and facilitator. She's a trusted peer health navigator assisting HIV positive people in particular to access treatment and healthcare services and achieve adherence. She represents the concerns of the LGBT plus community on a number of boards and committees and is well known for implementing beneficiary-focused projects. Driven by her passion to see a change in the quality of life of marginalized communities, in 2017, Brandy founded the Trinidad and Tobago Transgender Coalition, and her incredible work continues to today. Brandy, welcome. How are you doing tonight,
Thank
Brandy?
you. I'm good. I'm really good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really glad that the Trans Coalition could host this event because we have been, we have a lot to share. And we want to really get the message out there about the situation in the region and all for the month of Pride and after Pride also to continue what is happening.
Yeah, because so often we have such great conversations during the month of Pride, but we forget that life happens after and the community remains after the month. So great perspective. So Brandy, tonight, what are we going to be focusing on? We are going to be focusing on a number of topics, but more specifically.
Our more specific is going to be COVID-19, the impact of COVID-19 and HIV. And we want to share a little bit about prevention. Our conversation countries have been benefiting really well, like the Bahamas and Barbados. They would share their information in terms of how effective PrEP was and in terms of the stigma and discrimination that was reduced when PrEP was introduced as a prevention method. And to end HIV by 2030, we have to find situations and join on to to information that would support our U=U undetectable and transmittable. So I think that the prevention of PrEP has that has to be in our it is on our mandate and our focus for the moving forward. So I really want to and talk about government engagements, how much more government would have to do, because a lot of money was spent on COVID-19, and we would be having challenges with newly infected cases and lots to follow up. So that's the information we want to share and how best we can get the region involved in having a conversation like this, because HIV doesn't affect only the trans women, but we are one of the biggest sector that HIV really affects.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So we have an amazing panel of folks here tonight, and I'm going to introduce them one by one. So we have a panel of people from all around the Caribbean, and we're so happy that you could join us tonight. First up, we have Renee Green. Renee is an LGBTQ youth and women's rights advocate who's committed and passionate about her work. She served as an LGBT representative on the Jamaica Country Coordinating Mechanism for the Global Fund for 2 years and currently serves as the NGO alternate. She's also the Jamaica representative for UC Trans, which is the only regional trans network. And Renee currently serves as the executive director for Trans Wave Jamaica. Renee, welcome. So happy to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Next up, we have Alexis. Alexis DeMarco is an intersectional advocate with specific focus on LGBTI rights, women's rights, trans rights, youth development, sexual health and reproductive rights, rights for vulnerable and marginalized groups, the disabled and the elderly. She is the executive director of UC Trans, one of the most, if not foremost, vocal and prominent and active organizations spanning the entire Caribbean, doing the work of putting trans rights on the forefront. Alexis, welcome. We are so happy to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Exciting to hear the conversation from my colleagues from around the Caribbean region.
Yes. Up next, we have Raven Gill. Raven is out of Barbados, and she is a transgender activist who has founded Butterfly Trans in Barbados, which is the only trans-led and focused CSO working towards social justice reform to create a healthy environment for transgender and non-binary persons in Barbados. Passionate about mental health and legislative change to create a more respectful and inclusive society for the community that she serves. Raven advocates relentlessly, and she believes that the organization can achieve change. Raven, we are so happy to have you here with us from Barbados. How's Barbados doing tonight?
Thank you for having me firstly. We're recovering from the hurricane. There's a lot of power outages still, but luckily my area has been restored within the first day after the hurricane, so yes.
Okay, so great to hear. And considering everything that's happening, we're so glad to know that you're safe and that you're here with us. Finally, we have Yaisa.
Thank you.
Yaisa, are you with us? Make sure
Yes,
Yaisa's
I
with
am.
us.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you. We're not seeing you, but we can hear you. So I'll continue to introduce you later. Yaisa
Okay.
is a transgender Haitian American woman who, with the support of her husband, was able to channel years of stigma, discrimination, and intense isolation into the strength to become a fierce advocate for trans rights in Haiti. Yaisa is a co-founder of ACIFVH, which translates to Community Action for the Integration of Vulnerable Women of Haiti, a transgender-led organization whose objective is the social and political integration of transgender Haitians in Haitian society. So Yaisa, we're so happy that you're able to join us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. It is an honor. And I must say that I feel empowered and privileged to be part of this amazing panel. And hopefully you guys will be able to see me shortly.
Yes, don't worry about it. We know how the technology goes, and we're just so happy to all be here. So, Brandy, let me pass it over to you first to get the conversation started. We have this amazing panel of folks here with us, and we also have quite a number of people online. So, it's also to the folks online, feel free to contribute to the conversation via your comments. We'll be able to post it on the screen and interact with you that way. Thank you for joining us. So, Brandy, over to you.
Okay, thank you all. Really, I'm thinking that we all have the same challenges and issues in the region, and I know that trans health and HIV has been a topic on all of us, in the country for all of us. I want to start by saying what we suffer is the lack of access to justice, housing, education, employment, healthcare. These are some of the issues that we all have in common, and our conversation today is going to be the impacts of COVID-19, how COVID-19 will be impacting my community of trans women, because my community, my members still are like 75% of my community are actually sex workers who are presently engaging in doing sex work. With the COVID from 2020 and 2021 has a great impact on them. Have not been able to work, have not been able to access, to live, comfortable, and pay their bills, with having a PS saying that they're not going to work with us, my community, because of HIV and sex work. That was told to us in a stakeholders meeting last year. I think honestly we have to share what is going on with in terms of um, human rights and access to justice and employment and all of these, because we have all these barriers. Now, HIV has always been, a challenge for us in terms of accessing treatment and care. A lot was done in terms of medication. A lot will be done again in terms of understanding the U equals U program, which we have not been really doing enough of, from our treatment sites and our clinicians and our doctors. Enough is not being done with the U equals U being undetectable and untransmitted. Or that little bit of education has to go on. We need to talk more about that. We need to have more conversation, and we need to have prevention methods that has not been working, for a long time. We want to see more people, have more conversation in Trinidad and Tobago, where taking information and supporting information from the Bahamas and also Barbados about PrEP and how effective it was, and what we could learn from lessons learned, and so that we could talk to our governments in terms of we get the support and for people to understand what is really happening and what is going on. I know that nothing of this sort is new to anyone on this panel, because we have been talking about these challenges and issues for a number of years, and we could actually understand what is happening and relate it. But I just want to talk more about how the different and the COVID-19 has impacted HIV, because we will be losing our loss to follow-up. We will be losing our newly infected cases, because Trinidad has not been doing HIV tests since our last HIV testing date was on April the 22nd. We don't have any testing kits. We are out of testing kits. And we have not been able to really work with the newly infected cases, which is going to be a challenge that we're going to be having. And with COVID-19 and the impact with a lot of issues with persons who are being put out of homes and who have to, sleep with the older gay men to get support, that has been an issue and that has been a challenge. And this is a conversation that we need to reach out to these people at some point, and it must be before they, we mustn't meet them at the hospitals full blown. I want us to turn that around, because we have been meeting persons in the hospitals with CD4, under 20 and viral load in the million. That conversation has to change. And with the impact of COVID-19, I'm generally seeing this is something that we will be trying to change, and it's something that we have to have conversation, because this is the reality of it. I've been, having persons, meeting them on the wards with the viral load, in the millions, and the CD4 under 20. Because we did not have these kind of conversation, we don't have any information on prevention, or not enough information on prevention. We don't have something called PrEP, and that's supposed to be a right. And on where we are in terms of our 1990 targets, where if we have reached, because most countries supposed to be at our 95 targets, and then in order to end HIV in 2030. So I would want to hear what other persons would are sharing, because Trinidad and Tobago is not really in a good place in terms of this, and it's not an issue that we need to talk about this as trans men. We need to share the information. We need to talk about where we are, because there are programs in place right now. We have free testing we're supposed to have free testing in support of HIV, syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia that is offered. And we can't do the testing because of the determined kits that we don't have. So that's one of the challenges that we're facing, and we're going to move forward. Well, we still have to move forward in terms of HIV education and STIs. So I'm using this platform to educate the LGBTI members and other persons, other groups, in terms of where we are and what is HIV and what is STI and what we are talking about in terms how it looks and how it affects us. And trying to get the information out there because it's necessary. So generally, that is where the conversation is going to be. That is where I'm at in Trinidad and Tobago. And if anybody wants to jump in, probably Alexis or anyone wants to jump in terms of what is the reality that they are facing in the Bahamas, and probably Raven or even Renee, in terms of the reality of what is going on, please feel free to share.
Once again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to shed light on the situation as it relates to the Bahamas with HIV and COVID-19. As we know, COVID-19 has exacerbated the situation of our realities as trans citizens living in our countries. I mean, we've been battling HIV and now COVID-19. As it relates to HIV, we are now at a stage where we're taking responsibility. We're taking responsibility for access to health. We're demanding access to health, and we're taking responsibility for our health. So what we're doing in the Bahamas is, with the introduction of PrEP within the last 2 years, and uptake in PrEP, we've seen most of our community members are becoming responsible for themselves. So our messaging has changed as to being, you are responsible for your health. These are the options that are available to you. With adherence counseling, a simple follow-up call to our clients, we're able to keep them in care. Because of COVID-19, and the restrictions of COVID-19 and the protocols, there has been a decline as it relates in persons accessing their medications or staying in adherence. So our work has worked. We are now working twice as harder based on the restrictions that are in place. Persons aren't able to access clinics because of lockdowns, because of emergency orders. So this is the reason why we have some defaulters within our system. So what we're doing now is we're trying to get back into the program of letting our clients know your responsibility, your health is your responsibility, and your well-being is your responsibility. So for us, it's now encouraging them to stay on their meds, get back into care, get back at the clinic. We now, in the Bahamas, we had a change of facility of our national HIV program. So we had to begin to disseminate information to our clients and letting them know where to go and get meds if needed, where to go and access PrEP if needed. Again, government buy-in is very important as it relates to PrEP. PrEP is a human right for any citizen in your community. PrEP is something that is useful. PrEP is something that we see most of our LGBTI community members understand how important it is for them as citizens of their country to access them, especially those who are at risk. Again, it's an individual choice. Again, no one is forced to take PrEP, but that education and sensitization on PrEP we've seen has been a great help for us. And with the help of Dr. Nakia Forbes, who is our HIV program director, she has been a support for our community here in the Bahamas and making sure that we try to reduce our numbers as it relates to HIV and AIDS.
Reva?
Right. So just like Alexis said, the situation with COVID-19 and HIV has gotten out of control with regards to, again, the lockdown situation, limiting medication to those persons because everything was closed. So they were giving people a 2-month supply, initially thinking that it would have been a little more normalized by then. Then people started to get more medication because obviously COVID was extended and the lockdown protocols were shifting every other week. Then we ran out of medication. So there was no PrEP for persons that were on PrEP. Then when you stop, you have to retest. There was nothing to facilitate the retesting because everything was closed. There were people that were supposed to do their follow-ups 3 months, 6 months, however the doctors sees fit to put the timeline for that. All those things went through the door when COVID came into play. then PL-HIV persons could not get medication because the clinic was closed. Usually I would facilitate going for medication for for the community and taking it to them. Luckily, I had an emergency pass to be outside. However, the pass was useless when I could not get the medication to transport to these persons that needed it um, to sustain their life. With regards to the government usually, let's be frank, ignores trans persons, trans women specifically. And in Barbados, the MSM population is more known when it comes to accessing HIV care. The main clinic that is centralized for HIV treatment care and dissemination of the medication has a stigma on it. It has been for years, and it has only gotten worse with COVID as everybody is looking to see more who was going, who was not, those kind of things. And then when it came to the situation of you can't take medication if you don't have food to sustain your body. When you're taking these medications, you need to have at least basic needs, water, like whatever the case may be. And it was really hard when they were cutting off your utility bills. Then you didn't have food to sustain yourself. You couldn't ask your sister, your trans sister, for help because she was also struggling. And there was some funding to assist. It came really late, and then the rest of the funding was kind of unbalanced with the MSM population, where they got the bulk of the funding because they are a more visible, a bigger community as opposed to the trans community. I always say is a minority within a minority, but that doesn't make it right for them to negate the extra special needs that we have, and that has been seen throughout the Caribbean. So going forward, the route that we took was piggybacking off of the MSMs. If you send 400 bottles of PrEP and ARTs for the gay men, you need to send 550 for the trans community. And it's always a point of contention when you say we are trans, and people are debating, why do you feel you need more specialized care? But it's common sense. So battling with those factors has always been a big deal, and it has been worse since COVID has come into play. But I can say that the clinic is slowly making a change to be more adaptive when it comes to providing specialized care for the trans community. However, there are some persons that we've lost to care because they didn't feel valued, they didn't feel worthy, they didn't feel like they needed to go because there's not much knowledge, there's not much care shown to the trans community. And we were talking about the U equals U campaign. You would see gay men holding hands on a poster. You would see things targeted to the MSM and not to the trans community. Granted, for me, I think the conversation has been a little twisted when it comes to HIV and the trans community because of Latin America. The Caribbean is always lumped in with Latin America and the Caribbean. But Latin America has a huge population of trans women and men compared to the Caribbean. So when you see those staggering numbers of HIV in the trans community in Latin America, and people are translating it to the Caribbean as well, it doesn't match up. So they're saying we don't need as much medication. They're saying all of these things, and it's putting the community in a box that is hard to navigate going forward because we're still not seen, still not valued.
Again, thank you so much for having me. I'll just say that one, I find it very heartbreaking to hear, just the situation that's happening in like some of the other Caribbean countries. I'll say when it comes to the HIV response in Jamaica, that's not necessarily the same issues that we have. In fact, because of COVID, the response kind of doubled down and strengthened its work. Um, and particularly with the trans community, they've been trying, especially even harder, to get the necessary resources to the community. So for us, it's not our problem isn't access or the availability of the spaces to access the resources. They're there. And in fact, because our HIV response is so strong, um, like hearing Brandy just say that, they don't have test kits like that. That could happen um, in Jamaica. There would be so much outcry and outpour, and maybe picket lines and all types of things would be happening if that ever happened. And so, like the country in itself has been getting COVID specific support, and the different organizations that work within the country that work around HIV related issues have also been getting COVID specific support. And so, in those areas, we kind of doubled down and worked together to provide the community with the amount of support that is needed. Um, with us leading the charge, of course, when it comes to trans people and trans issues. The thing for us, though, and it's always been the same thing when it comes to HIV, is that the community is unwilling to access HIV related services. And they're unwilling to access these services because for HIV, though it affects us deeply, and we've done a number of studies around it. In fact, the last study that was done was a study called the 876 study. And we felt it was important to kind of get an understanding of where trans people were in terms of HIV. The prevalence rate for HIV amongst the community based on the study is, I think, 35%. I may be wrong, it may be higher. um, and that's our prevalence rate in Jamaica, right? And so, like, what we found to be very useful, especially when having the conversations around HIV and why it's so important for the trans community um, to be given specific services, is through the use of data. And so, we've done a number of research and stuff around, just like the health issues affecting trans people. And we've done we have the data to support what we're saying. And so showing that to our national response program, HIV response program, they've made the community a priority target group. But that in itself is also a challenge because trans people in Jamaica feel very HIV'd out. um, we have so much information and access that is kind of becoming overbearing, because now it's almost as if we're not seen as people but more as numbers or targets. um, and so that's where the challenges lie for a lot of trans people. While they understand that they need their HIV medication to live and to survive if they are infected, um, for us, our inability to access HRTs or to access gender affirming, procedures and surgeries becomes an issue. And so, for like a few of the girls have actually said, like, what's the point of taking my medication when I have to be forced to live as something I'm not? And so, one of the things that goes around too is that people will say that they prefer to live one day as their authentic self than 50 years as somebody else. And so, for members of the trans community, it's actually getting access to HRTs or other gender affirming processes that's important, as opposed to being tested or being treated for HIV. And so, what we've been trying to push, particularly within the HIV response in Jamaica, is to have a holistic approach or an intersectional approach where we talk about affirming trans people, and marrying that with their health care and the need for them to consider their health, or to take care of their health. And that conversation has been helping as well. One entity right now in Jamaica provides HRTs to trans women free of cost, and they're marrying that with PrEP, which we've started. about 2 years now, and so that's seeing a little uptake. And we're trying our best to educate more people around PrEP because there's some skepticism around it, but and that's mostly because people don't understand what it is and they don't understand how it works. And so doing the education work around that, and marrying the fact that they'll now have access to HRTs with that, has seen like a little result, yielding a little result in that. In terms of COVID-19, though, it really did have like an adverse effect on people's livelihood. A lot of trans people in Jamaica actually rely on sex work, and because of COVID-19 and the restrictions, they had to stop, and so their abilities to pay their bills and to live was affected. And so what we had to do was to come together as a collective, and raise funds to support the community in these ways and provide them with groceries or with money to pay their rent or money to pay their utilities and to support themselves for the time being. And so that's the type of work that we've been doing. And that's the kind of effects that's been happening. I mean, through COVID-19, the HIV processes and procedures have been strengthened. And they've been trying even more so to target the trans community, because they've realized just how vulnerable the community is. And they've realized just how, through the years of just trauma, the community is afraid of accessing the services. So, I mean, while it is the opposite, while we do have the things readily available in Jamaica, the community is still afraid of accessing it. And that's primarily because of the stigma and discrimination that, we have faced. And the fact that, we aren't able to affirm in these spaces. And so those are some of the areas that still need to be improved and that they're working on improving. Yes, I think it's you. Right.
Okay.
Y'all hear me?
Yeah, Isa.
Hello?
Yeah, go
Yes, can you
ahead.
hear me?
Yeah, we're
Okay,
hearing you.
hi. Once again, okay, thank you. I'm still not able to resolve the camera issue. I don't know what's going on. It's saying that I'm sharing on another device and I'm not quite technical. So, but I'm glad you can hear me. As far as HIV response and prevention and treatment for Haiti, the trans community has only recently is being acknowledged, being understood. The main problem is all the treatment and prevention and all the programs are targeted towards gay men or what they call men's, who have sex with men. And so the problem is that confusion, that association. So it is only now shortly that we have come out and people are recognizing that trans people, are separate, or, we have our own separate needs and our own separate issues. And that we are affected and unknown and marginalized. So the thing is now the issue is trying to build recognition. And also a lot of times when those trans people do try to have access to clinics or go to places where there are, the minimal services are there, they're turned away, they're shunned due to their, their gender expression and something that is not understood. And I get that stigma is also from cis hetero and cis homo, community, because there's a lot of pushback and misunderstanding, a lot of stigma and fear around trans people, because on one part, the the LGB are afraid of trans people because they feel that by them being the way, by us expressing our true gender, we're making things worse. Because where they're trying to cohabitate, blend into the community and not ruffle any feathers. So then there's this double stigma. They feel that trans people, trans men and women are making things more complicated and more, more threatening, especially in a country like Haiti where, religion and superstition and people are very aggressive. So that's one of the issues. So we're not even, and the same goes for COVID, because all the aid and services are centered towards gay men primarily. And so that's another thing. So to let us know that we're here, we're a separate entity and having our voice heard. So we're only at the dawn of that in Haiti. I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, that's a great presentation from everyone. Zoe, we have any questions from the panel, from anybody from the audiences? Yeah.
Yes, we do. We have a couple of questions from the audience. So the first person asked, are we able to say regionally how lockdowns across the islands have affected the mental health, therefore in the way of affecting the person's desire to access forms of healthcare? So in terms of checking in about the state of mental health and how that has been trickling into other aspects of healthcare.
Okay, that's a fantastic question, I must say. A lot of persons who are going through the process of this lockdown has mental challenge. Depression has an increase, isolation, and understanding the protocols for COVID-19 has created another thing in terms of for us to work with mentally, because Trinidad and Tobago, our Trinidad lifestyle, we are not used to this kind of lockdown, and to be in spaces where it's mandatory for us to do so much and then restricted with time and all of that. This is not a culture we're really exposed to. And then the other challenge is now you're home mixing with everybody else as a non-binary or a trans person. You have to mix now with persons you never used to mix with before. With the lockdown and the shutdown, everyone is at home, and then you with the lifestyle that you're exposed to or how you're accustomed living, now you have a lot of persons have become targets in the family, and it creates a lot of issues, creating a lot of challenges. And what we understand is there's a lot more for the mental health capacity. We need to do a lot more in terms of reaching out to persons, not just to have conversation, but also to deal with them on a work with medication for some of these persons who are so depressed, because it's not a month, it's not 2 months, it's a year and a half that we have been having these challenges. It's a very long process. And the depression, the stages of depression, I think they have different stages, and persons who have, they're just so depressed. There's a lot of depression. And I think more should be done. We need more support for mental health, and we need more, to create, because all of this would increase gender-based violence also. So we have these issues. I don't know if anybody wants to share from any of the other Caribbean countries.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, well, in the case of Haiti, the lockdowns have increased the displacement, because usually, like Brandy said, all the people being together and parents being home who would usually be out, in the marketplace, in the fields, or taking care of their business, are now at home. And now we have seen an uprise and young trans people being thrown away, displaced from their home, out in the streets. And that we have a shelter, and the numbers, the demand has like more than tripled, because now you have these parents or these people at home and these aunts and uncles, and say like, resources are scarce, so we don't want to waste. They consider their trans children or nieces, nephew, whatever relatives as a waste of time. I'm not going to waste time on you. So they return them to the streets. And again, the vicious cycle, being in the streets, and especially with all the violence and kidnapping and whatever that's going on. So, it is total desperation. And, they can't even turn to sex work because it's it's minimal, it's minimized, it's not the same, and now they're more visible with curfews and things like that. So it's really, really, really critical in that situation as far as young people being, displaced, turned out of their home, turned away from their homes and community due to the proximity of the lockdown.
Yeah, I think COVID-19 has kind of highlighted the need for greater psychosocial support for the community. And I mean, Brandy touched on it a little bit, but like in Jamaica in particular, we've seen a spike in not just gender-based violence, but particularly IPV, intimate partner violence. And so, because of that, there have been greater calls to kind of step up our work on or the programs in general around gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. Because these are things that, people did not account for that would happen, in COVID. Jamaica doesn't have a lot of shelters in general um, to support women in general. And so, when you look at these issues and these things that come up, and you recognize, the need for even greater support for the community and other people who are, going through so much because of COVID. Um, because people are home and because people are just there, these things become more apparent. Um, and so just providing more spaces for trans people to be able to get that type of support is so important and needed. And particularly because even though, there is COVID-19 and, you know, we aren't able to congregate as we used to. We have to come up with new ways to provide support. And so one way in particular is to use our online methods more, use our Zoom and our other things and provide spaces, as well as, the resources for community members to be able to access, care from their cell phones, from their laptops, because that is important and still providing space for the community to gather, even though it might just be virtual, because that in itself is a form of relief, and it is support, and it's providing the kind of care that they need, even though they might not be able to come out of the space or the home that they're in. With the specific restrictions that we have, particularly for landlords or for people who may have children who are trans, they can't just throw them out because then the police in Jamaica, because of COVID-19, of course, on a typical basis, it would have they would do it and they would get away with it, but because of COVID, tighter restrictions that people can't just put out people anymore. Even though Jamaica is opening up now, but when when the restrictions are even tighter, parents could just put out their child, like that would have been like a no-no. And of course, this is only because of COVID, because we know these things happen regularly. But it doesn't mean that the abuse stops because they're still in the house, right? And so we've actually spoken to especially younger trans people who say that their parents stop feeding them, or they're constantly being you know receiving verbal abuse, and it's doing things to them. And so we've had to find ways to support them through the period. And so it's getting them to a counselor that they can talk to, providing them with credit so that they can make the calls, or access to internet services so that they can go on like our support groups and our Zoom meetings, because those are effective spaces that can help to support the community, right? And I think as leaders, providing, and as organized, as people who have organizations that provide that type of support, it's important that we try to figure out ways to kind of help to offset these things, because I mean, we're not the government, right? And we don't have the resources or even the mandates to do a lot of these things, but as best as we can, we try to support.
produce giving you information as relates to our regional network, providing support, especially psychosocial and mental health support for our community. Us as leaders, we need to take time for ourselves. So here at UC Trans, we found it very imperative to have a mental health when the pandemic hit with our leaders. Dr. E, who is a ally of the community, who supports us and supports our community, we had a session for persons who are part of UC Trans to be able to just digress from COVID-19. Because if we're not healthy as leaders to in our mental state, how are we going to help our other community members? So when we talk about what support looks like and what happened during COVID-19, we as a board had to come together and say, hey, we're breaking down too. We even had members who needed data for themselves to be able to access for their community. So we had to reach out to some persons in other countries and say, hey, can you put a little data on the card for one of our members? So those were things that we were doing. Also, we found providing food packages here in the Bahamas for community members is very critical and vital, because once family members or parents, whoever they're staying with, see them bringing something in the house, it will reduce their chances of being put out of the house. So what we started doing was mapping persons in our community who we know live with family members who may be at risk of being thrown out based on their sexual orientation or their gender identity, perceived or known. So we started linking them to food packages at least once a month. They're bringing something in to make that connection to the family. We've also started collaborations with Hands for Hunger, which is a civil society organization in the Bahamas. We also made collaborations with the Red Cross. So we started, like Renee said, they found some gay and COVID kind of exposed some stuff. So by collaborating with these NGOs on the ground, we're able to provide support and assistance to our members here in the Bahamas.
Okay, lovely, lovely. Was there anybody else who wanted to share just on a perspective in terms of mental health and healthcare? I feel like we covered that fairly extensively. There was one last question by Sharon Motley. Question to the non-Trinidad panelists. Are there processes and policies within the public health sector in your country to address LGBT discrimination with respect to accessing healthcare? So any public policies that aid in alleviating discrimination?
Right, so I'll speak to this very quickly. In Barbados, we have a great partnership with the Ministry of Health. So there are a lot of polyclinics and the main HIV healthcare center that have been sensitized to the community. However, again, it is mainly MSM sensitized. They're okay with the gay men coming. They're okay with the flamboyant men or the DL men coming. But when it comes to trans, they're still spooked. When it comes to gender expression, it's still discrimination. And this is overlapping the previous question. Mental health has only become prevalent to those people who would have been locked up with their horrible family members that are not of the LGBT community. We in the community have been advocating for this for years, from the time we've transitioned, pre-transition, throughout consistently. So now with these policies that are in-house, if you go as a gay man to healthcare facilities and you are discriminated against, you can complain and the person will be reprimanded in some regard. Trans, not so much, because we still don't know what trans is. It's still new to us. We're still trying to figure it out. I thought it was just you were just a man in a dress, all that crap. So in terms of fighting to get more comprehensive policies that will actually be enforced when they are discarded or abused. For the trans community specifically, these are things that we are adamantly working on, because you will see the double standard. It's fine for lesbians, it's okay for gay men, trans, hellfire. And that is a problem that we have regionally, individually, in community, in country. But the Bahamas has a doctor who is trans friendly and sensitized. Jamaica has providing HRT to the community. In Barbados, that is supposed to be more progressive than the other Caribbean countries, what the crap that they've been bragging. We don't have HRTs. We have the Barbados Family Planning Association, who is trans friendly and providing care, but it's a private clinic. You have to pay for these services. But the girls and guys can't pay for the services because survival sex work has been cut off because of COVID and lockdowns. Those who don't do sex work may have been doing care, cosmetology services. Everything is locked down because of COVID. Those who have activist jobs and pushing for community can only do so much out of pocket. We still need to take care of ourselves, like Alexa said. We still need to be there because we're being broken down, doing everything every which way we can for the community. So then what happens when we are no longer there? And I don't particularly love the word gatekeepers because it has a negative connotation depending on the light being shown on it. But we have to be gatekeepers and make sure that our community is taken care of, but we're still a part of the community ourselves. So we need to take care of ourselves some way, somehow.
Yeah, yeah, great perspective.
Yeah.
Alexis, how are things in Barbados with regards to? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I said you were gonna say something. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Just briefly adding to it. So in Haiti, there is no legislation for or against trans or LGBT per se, but that the issue is still the attitudes and deep-seated religious beliefs and convictions. So the thing is that we've been doing as I at ASIF is trying to educate, working with healthcare providers, working with allies who are in the public, and the Ministry of Health, trying to change attitudes, give them SOGI awareness of what, as Raven said, because people don't know what is gender identity. What is that? To them, it's like, oh yeah, you can be gay. We don't have a problem with you being, a gay or a sissy or a fat, but why are you taking it overboard to actually wear a dress? They're saying, as this is crazy. To quote on sissies trying to cause unrest, pushing the envelope way too far. So they see the thing, it's still against the battle is against attitudes. Letting people know, what is, because they still have that binary notion of gender of, cis man and cis woman. So that's still the problem. It's the problem, though there are no legislations, but it's the attitudes, that are based on religion.
Yeah, great perspective. Great perspective.
Yes, it is based on the attitudes because the Bahamas has decriminalized same consensual sex in 1991, but you still have behaviors and attitudes of the general public who still discriminate, who still have their opinions, who still have their biases. But I can say today, through sensitization and education with the Ministry of Health, I know that we here in the Bahamas have been doing our training and sensitization sessions with our healthcare providers. And I think this needs to be an ongoing program for trans communities because nurses change, doctors change, and every time these staff change, you have to go back in and you have to train. We do have the HIV/AIDS Center do have a discrimination policy that they don't discriminate against anybody. And like Raven mentioned, we do have a director who is an ally of the community. So for us getting access to trans services, HIV services is there. We don't have access to HRTs, but what we're doing is the messaging of our health is our responsibility and breaking down those barriers that my own trans community have. That's how I started doing the work and through peer navigation programs by taking them to the clinic. And even doing secret shopping at the clinic. We send our clients, how was your experience today at the clinic? Did you experience any type of barrier, stigma, discrimination? And we do get some reports of persons who go to the clinic based on the fact that maybe a family member knows them or they're a friend of the family and they get some type of thing. That's the only thing that we've been noticing with our clients. But again, as community leaders and as community members, community is very important. Getting the correct information. Sometimes we do have to hold the hand of our community members inside of these clinics in order to access treatment, care, and support. And we found that to be a good practice here in the Bahamas, actually going with them. But again, you have to get comfortable with your community, because you have some community members who won't disclose their status. But you have to get to a point where they can trust you as a community leader. They can trust you in accessing services. They can trust you that if they report something to you, that you're going to keep it confidential. And we found that within Caribbean communities, there's this lack of confidentiality as it relates to being HIV positive. And for us, we're trying to break down that stereo and that stigma in a community. HIV is not the read. Not taking your medication is the read, and that's that we take to our community members.
You're muted, Zoe.
Great perspective. Thanks for sharing. Thank you. Brandy, was there anything you wanted to just mention on that? That was kind of one of the last questions that came up in the comments.
Actually, we, as an advocate and as a human rights defender, working for the many years with allies, with government, with ministry, with other NGOs, I think my thing is try to sensitize, try to train, try to educate, and then we could do an implementation, look for how best we could implement. Things don't just work in the way you want it to because of being marginalized and vulnerable. And a lot of persons will not understand transgender. They might understand gay men. They might understand, the drag queens. But being trans, it is not the same. So we need to do a lot more of advocacy in terms of sensitizing and training and asking for the education and the support from the government to start to have the conversation around gender identity and sexual orientation. And some of the things that affects us, what our challenges are. For gay man is not employment, it's not housing, it's not access to justice. For the trans people, these are our issues, these are our challenges. This is what we're asking for, and this is the support. And then we try to implement policies that, that would work for us as trans women and as for the trans community and the non-binary people. We need to do a lot more and work a little harder to support. And being on this platform with PrideTT, with family planning, with the Trans Coalition, with the Women's Caucus, I honestly think with the support that they would give to the community, it would be easier for us to start to do implementation and for us to work collectively, to support any kind of policy that is needed, because we have to know what we're asking for, and we have to share what is there in terms of what we want. And I think everyone in the region, we have our own different challenges, as we just hear, and we could do a lot more. We need to do a lot more. And I really want to thank persons tonight for coming out. This is my closing statement. I really thank you all for being a part of this. Yaisa, Raven, Rennie, Alexis, you, Zoe, and our audience, PrideTT, the Trans Coalition, family planning, and the Women's Caucus, and South Pride, everyone. Really thank you all for being here to share and listen, and share the questions, and we could have more visibility as trans women in terms of hearing our issues and where we want to go and where we are. I thank the opportunity, and I really want to see, we need more. We need more of this. Don't wait for Pride for us to do this. Pride is for trans women is 365 days a year. So we need to really do more for ourselves as trans women. Thank you.
Yes.
So if I can say the last thing
Of
for
course, of course. I was going to give the floor to anybody that wanted to give any closing statements. Yeah, go ahead.
right, no, so it's just to go back to the last question, in terms of policies. Um,
Yes, yes, yes.
I mean, for Jamaica, because they've been intentional, at least over. And so when I say intentional, that this movement has been, a lot of hard work, in terms of getting to where we are now. It took a lot of, me going into meetings and just cussing people out, um, to even get a seat at the table. But it was worth it, because when you're having these conversations, it's important so people know that nothing is easy for us as trans people.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Nothing comes easy for us, and we always have to fight, but sometimes it's worth it. And so, people will have all types of opinions about you. People will have all types of things to say about trans people. They say we're angry. They say we're a lot of things. And I own it. Yes, I'm angry. I'm angry because my community is in need, and I don't have the same access as a cisgendered heterosexual person, or even as a cisgendered queer person. I don't have the same access, and so I'm gonna cuss, and I'm gonna come in swinging, and I'm gonna fight until I get a seat at that table. And so it took us almost 6 years. We got a seat at the table, but even when we're there, like, as trans people, sometimes we do have to do for ourselves. And then when we do it, then we can push it, right? And so, like, one major thing I would want to leave for, like, everybody here is to invest more in research, about the community. The more we understand ourselves, understand how these things affect us, is the more we're able to speak on our own behalf, and we can come from an informed place. Um, there are policies within the HIV program to protect trans people against discrimination, but then there's none outside of that. And so there's no legal framework or legal national policy that specifically speaks to trans people and to the protection of trans people, and that's a problem. And so, like, we're talking about HIV, and I'm so glad that Brandy even brought it up, is that when we talk about healthcare, we seem to forget that all of these things intersect, and they're all important. So housing is important for us. Education is important for us on our healthcare. Access to food and access to social security, those are also important to our healthcare. Because if we don't have, these holistic things in place, then we can't really focus on health. Because I can't take medication if I'm hungry, and I can't buy food if I don't have a job, and I can't get a job if I don't have access to education and all these other things. And so what we did, and I'm hoping other countries can replicate it too, is that we developed, a trans health strategy that looked at all these things and how they affect us. And then what we did, we went a step further and we costed it. And so now we're talking to our governments to say, we costed it. This is what trans people need. These are the gaps. These are what we need. This is how much it will cost. And based on what we're seeing it will cost, it really won't cost you much, because you have some of these things in place already. You just need to ensure that trans people have access to it from, like, a national standpoint or a national framework. And the policies need to be amended to say this also includes trans people. And so I think if we come from that informed place, then we have more say and we have more power. Because when we go into meetings and rooms, they're gonna be like, where's your evidence? Where is the data to support what you're saying? You're saying trans people are poor. Where's the evidence of that? And so we have that evidence. We can tell you, that almost 20% of young trans people between 18 and 35 are homeless. And we can tell you that at least 30% of our population is also unemployed. And we can tell you that there's a 35% prevalence rate for HIV for the trans community in Jamaica. So therefore, you can't tell us that we are poor. You can't tell us that HIV doesn't affect us. And you can't tell us that we're not unemployed, because data doesn't support what you're saying, right? So therefore, you
Yeah.
need to make sure that you have the programs in place to protect us and to give us the same opportunities that you claim we already have. And I'll just end it there. Thank you.
No, such great perspective. The data is so important. Even in Trinidad, that's something we face, in which the politicians have told us, well, where's the evidence of the existence of transgender people? You know, they would come back to us and say, well, on record, we only have one person of the community that exists. So that's a great fact. We were about to close, but we have another partner with us, Zania from Belize. Zania, welcome.
Hi, my apologies. I forgot we're in different time zones.
Yes, I think we forgot also. So no worries about that. So Zania, before we go, we just want to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity to add your great voice and perspective. We wanted to ask you about the impacts of COVID-19, specifically on the trans community in Belize, how y'all are navigating, whether there has been any kind of government assistance, program support, that kind of stuff.
Okay, well, it is without going to say that throughout the region, trans women and specifically are being largely disappropriated. As trans individuals, we do not have many of the amenities that cisgender individuals in our community have. And if we look at people with certain privileges, even within those small communities and communities of different key populations, are still trying to navigate the system. And it just makes it even difficult. COVID has made it even much more broader, the conversation and the information when it comes to trans and trans rights. The access to different government agencies has been it has been clear to the different institutions, to the work that we do, to different organizations, that without any sort of understanding and cooperation from agencies and governmental bodies, that we will continue being the last in the LGBT spectrum. Everybody speaks about LGBT being a group. However, even in our own communities, we find that we still have to face different boundaries and discriminations coming from our own groups. There has been, to some extent, linkages created between the LGBT community. However, we still are marginalized even in our own community. When it comes to access to different governmental bodies, without an ID, any identification card, especially for someone who has been through the process or has or someone as myself who has been through a longer process to change their characteristics. It is difficult to come and say, this is me. I am this person. I need this. How can we say that the government is working along with us when we are still left unaccountable within the government agencies? We are ghosts within our own communities. We are ghosts within our own countries, because we are not being counted on, and we are not being allowed to express ourselves freely. When it comes to expressing who we are, it becomes a problem. And even though different agencies, National AIDS Commission, even though we're in the CCM, we still have to work up that ladder to some level of respect, because what is happening is that it's sort of a level of tokenism, where they're just putting trans individuals in seating position to say that they are occupying it because Global Fund requires it, to have different individuals of different key populations within their body working together. But how respected are we? And even though we have a voice within the seat, that is just one individual amongst 20 of them. It makes no difference, because whether or not we want to accept it, when it comes to quorum, an individual such as myself will not find that. So it makes it difficult. And even though we are working with these population and they're saying, quote unquote, that they're working with our population, they still don't take us for granted. And whatever we say really takes a back step. So we have to work for respect. We have to work for inclusivity. And even though we are sitting in certain positions, we are not still being respected for that position that we hold. We can say whatever we want. I'm the alternate at the CCM. However, I am not being informed of many of the decisions being happening, and it's so frustrating because they come and they say, for example, it was like a month ago where we brought the community because at first they said we didn't have a community. So what we do, we work along with a university where we managed to do the population size estimate for trans and MSM. Okay, they asked for numbers. They got the numbers. What happened next? So now for this global fund and how global fund is working, they're saying, oh well, we need to see projects for the trans community. How can you? How can we do that if we're constantly sitting in these spaces and we're telling you exactly what we need, yet you decide on who does the decisions come from? It doesn't really comes from us. So if you're asking for different projects that are coming for us, at least listen to us. It has been years now that we're sitting in these tables and we're literally tailoring the project to cater not only for trans individuals but for the LGBT community. Yet we are still the last persons to hear anything and to get any of our projects approved. Uh, so it makes it so difficult. It really makes it so difficult because they say they're listening to us, but they're not respecting what we say. Um, it's fine that they have a trans individual, they have different individuals sitting in these tables, but we are not being listened to exactly how they can tailor it. Like I said, recently I had a discussion with them because they want to tailor it again once more for the trans community here in Belize. And I was like frustrated to the extent where I was like, I have been sitting around you guys for more than 7 years trying to tell you this is what we need. And something as simple as a gender market could alleviate most of the problems within our countries. Because we as individuals, we know how to navigate the system. It has been shown in Belize, we have proven that we individuals have the capacity to navigate systems, to find ways how we can tailor certain institutional bodies to cater for us. But they're not listening to that. They're not listening to how we are bringing solutions to what we're saying is the major problems. And that is what we need them to understand, that this is by trans and for trans. And when they understand that we are not here complaining and simply saying that we're a marginalized community, when they start listening to what we are bringing, not only the complaints but the solution, then maybe we're gonna have a faster success road.
Right.
For me, I've been fortunate to say that I have girls working not only in the stereotypical places such as salons and but I have individuals who have their own salon. They have managed to do that. Whether or not they have a gender marker assigned or they have changed their name legally, but they are managing that. I have girls working in retail store as trans women. And more and more young individuals are finding their way even in the educational system, accessing their own education, whether or not they can further that because of the cash route. That is something different. But we have individuals presently making changes and breaking those barriers, and I see that now with the younger population because with the whole technology and social media, where it has been able for queer individuals to identify as such, and not only identifying but expressing themselves. It has made it a broader subject within social media, and it brings it across to the younger generations, and they are accepting. So what is
Right.
happening? Either it can be religion, or it can be new politics and politicians coming into every 3 5 years coming, and all the work that you have done for all those years just go to waste.
Yeah.
It can be their own biases and influences that are coming around, you know. But and even though we want to say we are more than just an HIV status, I think we have been resilient into saying that we have found ways how we have used the HIV response to bring across not only solutions for healthcare, but the different not only the borders, but how we can cross those borders to find the solutions for our community. I think we have been very productive in using the system, and it's so unfortunate. Yes, it's really unfortunate that we have to use funds of certain HIV projects. But we have found ways how we can talk about HIV and talk about the reality of trans individuals. We can talk about HIV and we can talk about um, poverty. We can talk about HIV. We can talk about the lack of education. We can talk about HIV, and we can talk about even our gender markers not being respected. We can talk about discrimination. We can influence changes about stigmas are associated with trans individuals. So the system is placed there, but as trans individuals, as trans group, as being regionally connected, we have found that we are resilient. We have found that there are ways that we can work, um, and we have shown them that we are a group with the capacities to not only say here I am, but to say how I can be counted as an individual, not only because I deserve that right, but because I influence and I give back to my community. And how can I achieve that more is just by having different institutions accept not only my reality, but accept me as an individual living in my country.
And respect.
And
Respect.
yeah, yeah.
Great input, great perspectives, Anya. Thank you so much. I'm so happy you were able to make it, because this was definitely the additional dollop of perspective and information that we needed to just wrap out this conversation tonight. So thank you so
Yes,
much.
for me, it is always, it is important because where we are located, we do not only reflect, the Latin community, the Latin trans faces, but we also have the Caribbean lifestyle and living. We find different faces, and this is what we need to understand, that working together, and showing the different faces of trans individuals, not only individuals that look like me, but different individuals from the Caribbean with different languages, religions, and different tongues. It is very important that we keep the conversation going, because I've seen how within the region and working with reluctance, but through the perspective of the Latin eye, can also be damaging to the work that we do here in country. We're people who speak the patois still in my country. We have the Caribbean culture. We come
Right.
with Caribbean culture. So it's not only for me, but for the other
Why?
population that's coming forward. The
Right.
use of is what is from me is I have to keep on focusing, and I have to keep a clear my mind much more open, because whether or not they want to accept, we are Caribbean, and it is something that hasn't really been discussed around the world. Um, trans women, and specifically, don't only come with this face. We're not only like colored or straight hair or long hair, which within this region it is believed. And even in my country, I still struggle with that because they assume that the trans or being trans only is found within the Hispanic culture or people of my descendants.
Yeah.
So for me, it's so beneficial to have you guys to show your faces because we are more than just a face. We are individuals, we are a group, and we have to continue the discussion around culturally changing minds as well. Culturally changing minds.
Yes, 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 definitely. Definitely. We're going to take that opportunity on that note of culture and also representation across the Caribbean to thank all of these beautiful trans beings that have joined us tonight. Alexis from UC Trans in Bahamas, Yaisa from ACIFEH in Haiti, Renee from Transwave Jamaica, Zania from Belize. Zania, remind me of the name of your organization.
Trans in Action Belize.
Trans in Action Belize. Lovely. And we also had Raven from Barbados. Raven had to run off. So, ladies, all of you, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Our conversation has been so rich and so enriching. And we want to thank you for taking the time to share space with us and to share your perspective. We appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Alrighty, so Brandy, that was a great, great conversation we had. I want to take this time to thank you in my PrideTT seat, even though I sit in all these seats. So, but on behalf of PrideTT, we want to thank the Trans Coalition for this incredible panel tonight, the first of its kind. And we had such a great cross-section of representation from across the Caribbean. So congratulations.
Thank you. And then we have something coming up, Trans at Large. I think it's on the 17th.
Yes, Trans at Large on the 17th.
I think we have a different perspective for that. It's in the planning. So I'll be sharing more information as we go along. Also, I want to remind people to join on the everyday Monday to Friday HIV and STI education from 6 to 7, and for us to talk more about where we are in terms of HIV for marginalized and vulnerable persons. The presentation has, it strikes everybody differently, and the conversation is really, really going well. So I really want to say thanks again and remind people to join in, because we have we don't have any HIV testing right now, but we're doing free syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia. So please get in contact with me. Let me get the appointments for you so that we could start to get some of these free services, especially for the month of Pride. We need to get persons booking these appointments to get these services for free. Please get in touch with me. We need to start to do this. Don't let it pass, because opportunities like this don't come back. So please, persons, take advantage of the free service with syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia. It's important that we do that now. Thank you.
Yes, and as you can see, we have posted the link in the comment section. So if anybody that wants to join, there's the link, and it's also, you can message us at the Trans Coalition on Facebook or Instagram, or email us and we will get that link to you. Brandy, thank you so much, and we're looking forward to Trans Women at Large on the 17th. Alrighty, folks, so that brings us to the end of tonight's event, Trans Women Caribbean Summit. I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you to the Trans Coalition, our co-partner in this event. Thank you to Brandy of the Trans Coalition for moderating, and to all the panelists from Barbados, Jamaica, the Bahamas, Haiti, Belize. We had such great representation of trans women from across the Caribbean. I hope our viewers understand how history and herstory making tonight has been. We encourage you to tune in tomorrow as we have I've Got Two Moms, right? Which is an event about lesbian mothers. Tune in tomorrow night for that. We have some great program later on in the week. We have Amore, which is our Latin night. And this weekend, we have our film festival coming up. We'd like to remind everybody, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram at PrideTT, Twitter. You can check out our, hi Tino, getting some highs in the comments and some loves. Some good nights. Yeah, so don't forget, check us out, pridett.com/events. We want to remind everybody to follow and share the events, share it with your community so that we can get more people involved and participating. And that brings us to the end of tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Ciao, ciao, ciao.